Guys, I'm in a bit of a dilemma here. I need your help choosing what my next video is gonna be about. On one hand, you have ancient Greece, considered to be the birthplace of democracy. One of the most advanced civilizations of ancient times, it resulted in immense developments in art, philosophy, science, and definitely deserves to be talked about more. On the other hand, there's Sparta. They have a knife. I think I'm gonna go with Sparta. That's right, you can study your Socratic dialogue all you want, but that ain't gonna do shit against an entire country of people who've spent their entire lives becoming warriors. You've probably seen or at least heard of Sparta at some point in your life, mostly to A-list Hollywood celebrities running around shirtless with oiled up rock-hard abs, but that movie made $450 million, so it's really your fault for being so detrimentally horny. But how did the everyday Spartan really live? Were their lives completely devoted to the military? Is it true that Sparta was invented by the CIA to sell more gym memberships? Well, I guess we'll find out. But first off, where even is Sparta? I don't see it on the map, so clearly there's something going on here, CIA. Well, Sparta used to exist in what's now modern-day Greece, somewhere around the bottom of this island. Its exact borders aren't really known, cause, this all did happen like 2000 years ago. But trust me, it's there. Somewhere. Now, while its neighbor was all about the whole democracy and human rights nonsense, Spartan society was built upon one thing and one thing only. They did have a few slaves here and there, but pretty much their entire country was based on one occupation, the military. But it wasn't always like this. Sparta first came into existence when these 4 villages came together under one town to form the state of Sparta. And at this point, it was all pretty chill for them. They were in a nice fertile valley, unlike those other fools, so they had a bunch of food for their people. And they spent most of their time writing poems and making pottery. How sweet of them. They were truly living the life of an early civilization. But just like every other early civilization, it all changed when they discovered the wonders of slavery. So next to Sparta at the time was this place called Messenia. They had some fertile lands too, so they were doing pretty well. But I guess all that poetry and pottery was making Sparta hungry. Hungry for blood. So they decided to take over Messenia. And after a few decades of sieges and conquests, they managed to get the place under their control. And as for the people already living in Messenia, well, obviously the Spartans had no other choice than to turn them all into their new slaves. What else were they gonna do? Give them rights and treat them like humans? Go back to Athens, you filthy communist. So now Sparta had a huge number of indentured workers doing all of their farming and pottery and whatever else they were up to. And this resulted in pretty much every citizen of Sparta having nothing to do. Why do hard manual labor when you cannot? So what happens when you have an entire country of dudes just chilling with an abundance of resources and no work to do? You wanna kill someone? And so started Sparta's absolute obsession with the military. They obviously needed a large military to keep their entire country of slaves in check, so they dedicated their entire lives to it. Their society was devoted to just creating the strongest and most loyal soldiers they can, and they started this process all the way at the start, as soon as a baby is born. When a Spartan baby is born, the first thing it experiences is a nice refreshing bath in some quality alcohol. This was to make sure that the baby was strong and not some pussy-ass bitch who can't chuck down a beer as soon as it pops out of the womb. If the baby survived, it was then time for the council to judge its fate. This was basically a bunch of old guys who looked at kids all day and judged if they were fit enough. So basically what the Catholic Church does. If the baby looked strong, it was deemed worthy enough to be raised as a citizen of Sparta. If the baby had some form of disability or just didn't look like it could fight in a battlefield, well, some historians say that they just yeetused that fetus, some others say that they just left it at the side of the road, but in any case, it was gonna have a pretty bad time. After being judged by the council and hopefully not being abandoned, the baby would then lead a pretty normal life. They better make the most of it though, because as soon as they turned 7, they're put right back into the military. They went to a special military school system called the Agogi?
Oye.
Close enough. The Agogi was mandatory for every single Spartan male from the ages of 7 to 30. All Spartan citizens were banned from trading or making things, so the military was really the only option for every guy out there. The boys had to leave their families and live together in military houses, and judging by what I've said so far about the Spartans, this was not gonna be a fun experience for them. They were given only one piece of clothing a year, which was a red cloak, and absolutely nothing else. So if it's laundry day or you spill something on it, well, I guess you gotta deal with the pneumonia yourself. The guys also had to weave and craft their own beds out of reeds completely by hand with no tools. I guess the Spartans mean something completely different when they tell you to make your bed. They also fed them just the right amount of food so that they would barely stay alive while also never feeling actually full, which trained them to survive during harsh conditions when food was scarce. But if you really wanted some more food, you were more than welcome to steal some from anywhere in the city. No, really, go ahead. It's completely natural to want more food, of course. But if you get caught, we will mercilessly whip you as a punishment, so it's really up to you. The members of the Agogi were grouped up under a captain of sorts and trained in combat and to become as strong as possible for the Spartan military. At the age of 18, they finally joined the actual military and continued their training there. Finally, at the ripe old age of 30, they could become citizens of Sparta by applying to the old guys from earlier and hoping that they accept you and actually do something that wasn't borderline child abuse. But if they reject you, well, you lose your chance and never become a Spartan citizen. Hope all that trauma was worth it. Now, although the system was pretty brutal, it did create a lot of equality among the citizens. I mean, rich or poor, old or young, you're gonna get fucked either way. Unless you were the king's son, of course, then you'd be getting as much food and rest as you wanted. And if you were disabled or just couldn't keep up with all the training you were forced to do, well, good fucking luck. Cause to the Spartans, unless you had multiple flesh wounds and were on the verge of death, you had no excuse to stop training. But one thing that Sparta did get right was how they treated their women. I mean, their main purpose in life was still to have children, of course, but they were given a lot more freedom compared to their counterparts in Athens. So it wasn't complete equality, but they were trying their best and that's all that matters. Women in Sparta were actually given a proper education. I know, shocking, which involved gymnastics and sports along with music and poetry. They could actually read and write, and just like men, their fitness was seen as a top priority. While women in Athens were more focused on grace and being all fancy, all Sparta cared about was making their women as strong as possible so that their children would turn out as strong as possible. Sparta also had child marriage laws preventing a girl's marriage until she was in her 20s, and they were even allowed to own their own land, which is pretty useful when your entire male population is off fighting a war for their whole lives. So overall, Sparta might be extremely brutal to its people, but at least it was extremely brutal equally. Now we've talked enough about Sparta's military training process, but what made Sparta's military so good anyway? I mean, when your entire country's primary objective is to create a strong army, you do tend to get pretty good at it. For starters, the Spartan military was a lot more organized than any of its neighbors ones. It was made of these guys called hoplites, who were armed with a shield and a spear. The soldiers would be trained to march as a single unit and were divided into groups, each having their own leader. They were trained to always stick together and march to the rhythm of a flute that was played by the army's own flute player, which I guess is a pretty good soundtrack to the sounds of mass murder. Now, keeping your soldiers organized and sticking together may seem obvious to us now, but these were pretty new tactics back in 300 BC times. Most armies would kinda just run in the general direction of the enemy and hope that they hit something, which does look cool as fuck, but it isn't exactly effective as a military tactic. The Spartans would instead fight in a phalanx formation, which involved them putting their shields up and pointing their spears forward. The shields protected them from the enemy, while the pointy bits, well, you got the idea. This formation was pretty hard to break through, and combined with them always working together and their hardcore training, this allowed them to maintain military superiority for a long time. Another thing that the Spartans did was take an animal like a goat or a sheep every morning and cut it open and read its organs. They would only go into battle if the organs were favorable. Now, I can't exactly vouch for the effectiveness of this practice, but if I was preparing to fight someone and they started cutting open live animals, I'm not saying I believe in it, but I ain't gonna fuck around and find out. But all good things have to come to an end eventually, and Sparta's military superiority was no different. Ironically, it was their strict military culture that led to their downfall. For starters, because of their rigorous and long citizenship process and the fact that they straight up yeeted some of their babies, maintaining the Spartan population was no easy task, and as time went on, the number of Spartan citizens kept going down because of a lower birth rate. This meant that their military size was reducing too. Plus, they'd also lost a few battles here and there, which caused their population to go down even more. Then an earthquake happened which killed thousands more, so their population wasn't gonna recover anytime soon. But wait, there's more. Remember the entire country of people that they have been keeping as slaves for all these years? Well, after the earthquake, while Sparta was trying to get its shit together, the slaves decided that this would be the best time to revolt against their masters, just to kick them while they were down. So now Sparta had a huge rebellion to deal with too. But oh no, I'm not done yet. After Sparta lost all these battles, they lost their prestige and title as the strongest state in the region. Their crown was falling, and the surrounding states made full use of this opportunity by poking and prodding at Sparta and attacking them continuously to slowly but surely take them down. Finally, in 146 BC, a bunch of Greek states teamed up with the Romans to fight against and eventually take over Sparta. It remained a city under the Roman Empire, which would have been fine until the Roman Empire itself fell apart in the year 395. The residents of Sparta were made into slaves, and that was the end of Sparta as we knew. I guess in the end, they got a taste of their own medicine. So yeah, that was the story of Sparta, the most hardcore country to ever exist. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, and watch another video by clicking right here. I'll see you guys later.